So, welcome to the seminar on market stats with Habistat. So, for those of you that don't know, Habistat is a new-ish. It's probably been around for, I don't know, roughly 6 months or so. Piece of software that's linked to the PropTech system. So you can access Habistat to get market stats, market insights, market reports, that kind of thing. So I'm Linus Kilius, Century 21 Heritage Group. As you all know, since we're all here from Century 21 Heritage Group, to give the seminar on Habistat. So first couple things I want to say about the platform. A little bit of a disclaimer, I guess. It's clearly made by computer programmers who are like stats people. Yeah, they didn't put enough thought, I think, in my opinion, to the user interface, the usability of the platform. That being said, like all the stuff's there. It can just be a little frustrating when you're first using it to get through the system, navigate around it, and just get familiarized with it. So just be patient with it. Hopefully, this seminar today will help you have a little bit of that kind of framework on how to navigate through the system. It's technically amazing, but it's not visually amazing. So it can be a little daunting. So this platform is great for investigating market trends. You can use these graphs in client meetings. You can use them to help justify pricing, just to see where the market is going, that sort of thing. It's really good, especially if you're like a numbers person, to get a lot more insight on the market. One of the nice things about something like Habistat as well, a lot of news coverage that you get on the real estate market, a lot of podcasts, news outlets, anything wherever you get your news from, it tends to cover macro level trends like the Canadian economy, the GTA economy, the Vancouver market, like that kind of thing. Habistat is great because it really helps you zero in on things on a more micro level, like neighborhood, a smaller town, right, that might be outside of the GTA, that sort of thing. So it gives you a lot more of the local level statistics, and it's important, obviously, as a realtor to have that local knowledge. Okay, so I am going to first show everyone how to get access to Habistat. Now, the way that you do this is if you go to ontario.mlp.ca, that's our portal for logging into all of our PropTech's services. You'll notice that under the popular realtor tools on the right, there's a little link here called MLS tools. If you click on that, Habistat is one of these options. And you'll notice here, I seem to be not being able to see it. There it is right there, Habistat. So once you click on that, it will bring you into the Habistat environment. And this is where, again, all the Habistat stuff lives. So this is a service that is provided through PropTech. So if you jump into it, it will ask you to log in using your PropTech user ID and password. Okay, so just starting off, that's how you get into Habistat. Again, it's not the most visually appealing, but I'm going to go over all the main elements. I'm just going to click to start on here on custom charts. Don't worry about where you start off here, because once you click on one, all of the four main categories are on the left here, and they're not super intuitive. A lot of this just takes a little bit of getting your groundwork and like knowing where to go. But just know that you have these main navigation items on the left, and then you've got your subcategories here in this column as well. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of the common elements you're going to see on most of the different charts and stats pages that you're going to see. And then I'm going to go through each one individually and just talk about the individual sections and where they can be advantageous for your use. So first off, along the top, you're going to see this a lot. For any sort of stat that you're looking at, you can change it between sale and lease properties. You can change the property type, is very common, just your detached, semi-detached, etc. One thing I want you to note about this, and this is something that isn't explained anywhere, I had to find this out by trial and error, but if you want to select more than one type, you actually have to hold down the control button. So if I want to do detached and semi-detached, if you hold down the control button or whatever the equivalent is on a Mac, you can select more than one. Okay, there's a little select all button at the top. You can select them all. They're selected by default. There's also the little arrow down here, so you can dig a little bit more deeply into the subcategories of each thing. But I'm not going to mess those too much now. I just want to make sure you're all aware of the property type filtering. The other thing is you can do location as well. This does cover most of Ontario. Starts with the county and drills down from there. So you can go down into like the specific neighborhoods as well. So it's got the county, the municipality, the neighborhood. hierarchy there. And you can choose as many as you want or as few as you want. It defaults to all of them across the prop tech system. So as you can see here, the sales volume is 351,000. So that's across prop techs over the past couple of years. Very often you'll have this date range too. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that to make sure you're setting your boundary limits. You won't have this for everything, but it does come up on many of different sections. Bedrooms, bathrooms, another thing you can filter by as well if you so choose to nail down the statistics in the specific ones you're looking at. The other thing that I want to show you as well, and this is another place that Habistat isn't the greatest, is exporting things. So if you have a great graph here and you're like, hey, okay, I want to show this to my client, the best way to do it is right at the very top of the page. There's export page and export visual. Export page, all it does essentially is take a screenshot of this whole page, like everything in it, including everything around the outside, as opposed to exporting visual, just exports the graph that you're looking at. And one of the other problems with this is like if there's anything that's tabular, like if there's like a long table, you got to scroll down to get some and dig into some of the information. Exporting the page or exporting visual won't export all of it. It'll just export the stuff that you can see on the page. It really just does a screenshot. So if you do either of those, you can choose if you want as a PDF or an image. It'll take a second, and then where that will be available. And again, not the most intuitive thing. It'll take a second to export it, and then you'll have to click on this download button, and it'll show you anything you've exported recently in the list. I'll give it some time. It takes a little bit of time to do it. It doesn't automatically download it though. So while that's happening, I'll just go over all the different sections. Again, we're starting in the custom charts section. So there are 4 sections. There's custom charts, past transactions, active listings, and market insights. You're probably going to spend most of your time either on the first one, custom charts, or the market insights. Again, it's not necessarily intuitive about where things are going to be. I'm going to kind of go over everything. A lot of it is just getting used to knowing where to look. So as you saw, like the download finished there. So let's click on here. You'll notice that this PDF line chart came up, and here's the export. So like I said, it's pretty much just a screenshot. There are some things I'm going to show you later on. For certain things, you can export like raw data to bring into like a spreadsheet that you can like change things and format things. One other unfortunate thing about the Habistat is you can't change things like the colors or like the titles of your graphs, that kind of thing. You're really stuck with what the display looks like on the screen itself. The other thing I want to say, which is a bit more of an overarching thing too, is there's a settings section, which is really important for 2 reasons. If you click on the settings, you can go in here and you can change between average and median price. I don't know why this isn't something that's a bit more transparent, but by default, it goes to median price. If you want average price, you'd have to select that so that all of the stats you're getting switch from median to average price or vice versa. The other thing too is Habistat's really bad at remembering what location you searched for last. So if you're searching for things in Richmond Hill, you may go to a different section, and then all of a sudden it's back to showing you all of Treb again. So the one way to kind of combat this is go in the settings. You can choose which area you want it to default to, and then it will by default, when you go into a new stat, it'll show just for that area. So if you did want to nail it down and you get frustrated with the fact that it keeps resetting on you, this is the place to fix that. There are a couple other settings in here, but those are the kind of key ones I wanted to highlight. And please, after you do your settings, make sure you use the back button. Don't just reload the page. It doesn't save it. Again, not the most user-friendly thing, but just something to note. So going through all these now, line chart. Again, this is the first one we're going through. This just shows you a very simple graph over time of whatever the statistic is that you're looking at. There's a whole bunch of them here, all your kind of key performance indicators. So you can choose whichever one you want. If you just want a simple graph, line chart's the way to go. Line chart by category. Now this will show you a bit more of a breakdown of, okay, here are the sales volumes by property type. So we've got detached, semi-detached. It's a pretty, there's a lot of data here. So one thing that I wanted to point out is that you can actually hide different property types by just selecting a couple of them. So if, let's say you want to just look at detached and semi-detached, again, you have to hold down the control button, but you can make it show so it only shows a couple data sets as opposed to like 10 or 15 or however many it starts with. You can change the statistic here, but just note that I believe, oh, maybe it's in the next section. Yeah. Some stats aren't actually tracked on a weekly basis, but down along the bottom, you can actually change the period that this shows. Like right now, it defaults to monthly, but you can show it year on year. You can also show it week to week. Not all stats are tracked weekly, though. So just be careful that if it does show up blank, it's not a mistake. It's just some of these stats aren't tracked on a weekly basis. They're just tracked monthly. So the column chart, this here is another example. It says at the top, this selected statistics not compatible with this chart type. So for column charts, it has to actually be a numbered thing, not a percentage or a dollar amount. So what this is showing you is like in this example here, sales volume by property type. So it shows you how many detached and semi-detached homes, because that's what I chose in the property type at the top here, over an for month to month for that category. I wouldn't say this is the most useful chart. Line chart's probably the more useful one, but this is a good way to look at the balance between two different property types. You can choose different breakdowns. It doesn't have to be property type. There's other ways to break it down. You can break it down by neighborhood. As an example, obviously there's a lot of neighborhoods here, so it's kind of a hard chart to read. But if you did say break this down to like just two neighborhoods, I'm just going to go into Algoma here. Whoops. As you can see, there's less neighborhoods in this one specific location, Algoma. I'm not even sure where that is, but you can break it down into different areas to try and make it a bit more palatable of an output. Mixed charts. Oh, geez, I got to change this here. So again, this is where the breakdown, I'm going to break it down by property type, just there's a little bit less noise. So again, since I've got detached and semi-detached homes, it shows the same thing as before, but instead of like a pure number, it just normalizes to 100%. So this shows you 91% of the homes that sold on January 2023 were detached and 9% were semi-detached. Again, some of these that I'm showing you now, I wouldn't say are the most useful charts. I'm just showing everything for the sake of completion. Line chart, percent change. Again, Habistat's not the greatest at naming these things. This is actually a pretty useful chart. What this shows you here is the percent change from the previous year. So what we're looking at here is the transaction volume from on a monthly basis and how it's changed from the previous year. So the nice thing about this is it shows us a baseline of 0, right? So if anything, this dashed line here shows you what the baseline is, then it'll tell you if the transaction volume is higher or lower from the previous year, right? So this is a good way to see how trends are going. Obviously, you can see that there was more transaction volume, say last spring, it decreased into the winter, which makes sense. And then it's still like year over year, it's been pretty poor for the past few months. So this is a pretty good way to get that kind of year over year metric. You can also change it to prior period, and then you can change it to weekly along the bottom. So this would show you like week to week how that change is. So just remember that you do always have these filters along the bottom to change the monthly period. And then you have these filters along the top to change something like the reporting period. Prior year is probably best in general. It gives you smoother data, easier data to read. Combination chart value percentage.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, yeah. I'm kind of playing along with you here as you go. Under location, I can just get regions. Now there's a little question mark and it says, if you want municipalities, click left-hand arrow, but I don't see a left-hand arrow.
So what that's talking about there, Ryan, let's say we wanted to go into, let's try and find your
I want
neck
New
of the
York. I want a
woods.
Newmarket, Aurora.
Yeah, so I'll go into York here. So there's the arrow it's talking about is this little arrow here. So if you click on the down arrow, you'll notice that it's now expanded York to the different York areas in York. Here's Newmarket. There's another down arrow here. You can click on that. Now it's giving you the neighborhoods. So like if you want any of the neighborhoods in Newmarket, that's how you'd access that. Okay, so that's the arrow it's talking about is this little arrow here. Can you see that on the screen?
Got it. That makes a lot of sense to me. Got it now. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, like I said, this it can be very frustrating. Like I spent a lot of time on this in the past week just to try and make sure I could figure all the ins and the outs, as well as those like little niggly things that make it very frustrating as a realtor who just wants the stats, right? And for like the the area that you're looking for, and it's not the most user friendly. Unfortunately, but it is very powerful. Like the numbers are amazing for this, and it gives you a lot of detail on that. Just moving on to the next one, this combination chart. what this shows you is what we saw before, right? And that percent change. So this bar graph that you see here shows you the percent change of, in this case, transaction volume from the previous year. But then it also overlays it with the actual transaction volume in terms of raw numbers. So it's just another way of like showing the thing from the previous bit. And again, with any of these things, like you can always go up and you can change what metric you're looking at. We're just looking at transaction volume to keep it kind of simple. So line chart 3x3 grid. This here shows you the key metrics based on whatever the breakdown is that you're looking at. So in this case, I've chosen the breakdown as property type. You can also choose it by like region or city or whatever it is. And it will break it down based on that selection. So if you choose, in this case, it's obviously all of Treb that's here, but if you chose by region, you can change. Like here, it shows you like Toronto, Peel, Simcoe County, York. You can control which ones it's going to show by selecting them manually here, right? And whichever ones I add to it by holding on control, it will add it to this little breakdown. So you can break it down by region, you can break it down by neighborhood, you can break it down by property type as well. So I did by property types, showing detached and semi-detached. If I removed this filter and selected them all, it would show me all the different property types that are associated with this statistic. So this is good because it can give you like a bit of a breakdown region to region or property type based on whatever metric you're looking at. It gives you a little bit of an overview. It's hard to read the numbers directly off of this, but at least it'll give you a bit of an idea of like the direction things are going for whatever statistic you're looking at. Year over year, this shows you whatever metric you're looking at for the past few years. And again, this is the kind of thing where I'm like, it looks really convoluted and messy. The reason is because it's showing 3 years overlaid on top of each other. You can change the year so that it shows based on the date range here. It's not the greatest for contrast. I don't know why they choose just blue for most things. And again, this is one of the failings of Habistat, but here you can see two overlaid statistics. One is from 2024, where the lighter blue one's from 2025. Okay. And again, this has a variety of statistics, all the key performance indicators that you can look at there.
Hey, Linus, a quick question here for you too.
Yep.
So just with respect to the integrity of the stats, I mean, there's a lot here, and I think it's great in a lot of ways. But when I drop down, go back to location again. When I
Yep.
go back to, it says York region, I do the drop down like we discussed, selecting Aurora. But underneath York, it has Burlington, it has Oakville. So when I'm producing stats from that area, is it looping in Burlington, Oakville? Those are major centers, and our stats won't be correct.
Yeah. So you can do a little bit of due diligence to try and figure out if there's any sort of like outliers that are looped into here. Like obviously someone who loaded their listing must have made a mistake at some point, put Burlington as a part of York, or I don't know how that would have gotten in there. But one thing you can do just to see like how much of an impact that has is by looking at when you're on a chart like the line chart, for example, at the very top left it says total numbers of listings selected. Right now that I've filtered it for just Burlington under York region, which it shouldn't be in there, it's saying there's no listings. So even though that's a category there, we know that is something that's not going to be affecting your stats, right? Because if I select all of York, it shows 15,819 listings. If I take Burlington out of that, it doesn't change the number. So that is clearly not catching anything. It's an error. Who knows where it piped into the system, but it's an important thing to note that because you can get things like that all the time. Like the data is only as good as the information that comes in here, right? Like even here, there's an out of area one. It's like, well, what does that mean? Let's take that out and see if that changes the number, right? It turns out it didn't. So those things, like even though they're in here, you now know that those aren't actually affecting the stats. So with any sort of statistics, it's important to try and figure out the data integrity here. And that's something to consider when you're doing it. But that is a good way to actually vet the data is by doing something like I just showed you there. So hopefully that helps, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, just kind of powering through here, historical stats. This is actually something I did want to show you guys because when I talked about exporting data, here's where you can actually export stuff like raw numbers so you can throw it into Excel. So there is this little 3 dots here, which would be super easy to miss if you didn't know to look for it. You click on that and you can actually export the data into an Excel spreadsheet. There's 2 options that it gives you: data with current layout or summarized data. They're the exact same. It's the exact same data puts out, just one's formatted and what's not. And I can't honestly remember which one's which, but either way, you're going to get the same data out of it. And it'll pump out this table here, which will have all your key performance indicators for the filters that you put in place. So if you want to take this stuff, put it on your own graphs or your own listing presentations, put it up with your own branding, your own colors, et cetera, make it more readable, this is the best way to do, is to come into historical stats and pull off the data through an export here. Okay. Summary stats. This just shows you the summary for whatever the area is. And this is also exportable as well. So this is more by the region. It can break it down by different segments, like in this case, property type. It can also break it down by region, city, etc. Okay, so those are all the custom charts, and that's actually the bulk of the different things that you can do with this. I'm going to show you the other ones a little bit more quickly here. Past transactions. This shows you a sales snapshot of the certain region that you're looking at, and gives you a bit of an overview for the time period that you're looking for. So there are two categories here, and I don't know why things disappeared. There's active listings, and then there's also past transactions. They do the exact same thing, but one's for sales and the other's for listings. So it gives you a snapshot of the area. It shows you like a bit of like a distribution of like where those prices were at, and like what the volume of sales were for the different buckets, as well as say like the different areas here. You can filter this by location, you can filter by property type. If there's things you want to take out of this, like say you wanted to take out all of the condos, you only want detached and semis, you can do that. Again, hold control when you're picking multiple things, and it'll take that information out of here, right? So now the pie graph here only shows semis and detached, and the same with the sales volume and the average sale price by location. So obviously, like, when you're looking at these numbers, think about what's included, because, if you're including condos and detached, that can skew your things like your average sale price. The sales map, I don't find this too useful, and I was finding it fairly unreliable. As you can already see, it says unable to retrieve the map. It does put everything on a map, but the data is the same, and it doesn't give you any additional value by having the stuff on the map. If you're going to be looking at sales maps or active listing maps, I'd say use Realm, Matrix, whatever your MLS system of choice is. It's just a much better way of getting that data. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to move on to is the market insights. I'm going to reload the screen here because it seems to be having a bit of an issue. Just give me a second. So yeah, you've got the 4 icons on the left. They were disappearing a second ago, but what I was showing you was the past transactions and the active listings. The final category is market insights. There's actually some pretty interesting stuff in here as well. The market insights, they've got about 7 or 8 different pages that you can look at here. The first one's a location overview, and I actually use this a lot, and I've used this in office meetings in the past. This gives you a really good breakdown of an area, right? It gives you all the active listings by price, all the key performance indicators for the sales in the area. Again, you can change these median prices to average prices if you go into settings, but that's the only way to change it, right? If I wanted these medians to go to average sale price, I have to go into settings, click on average, and go back. Again, don't ask me why it's like that. It's just the way that they built it. So if you like average price instead, you have to change it that way. So it gives you a good snapshot for the area. And again, you can change it by property type, et cetera. But this is a good like overall sense of what's going on in that area. Comparing locations is good for taking that last location overview and putting 2 of them side by side. So it uses by default here Brant County and Brantford. Who knows why? But you can change to whatever areas that you want or neighborhoods that you want and get a real detailed look at that specific neighborhood or region. Percent above list price is exactly what it sounds like. It shows you what percentage of listings sold during those time periods, during those months, above the list price. So that's what the yellow line is here. The bar graph in the background shows you the light blue is how many sold below list price, the gray is how many sold at list price, and the blue is how many sold above list price. So you can get some interesting insights here just by seeing, like, you can get a good sense of if something's a buyer or a seller's market. Like if you look back in 2022, like you can see the significantly more houses were selling above list price than below list price. This may also be a good way to get a quick sense for a neighborhood or a region of how many people are holding off offers, because a good chance is that most of these above list price were either holding off offers or stirred up competition. So you can get a sense of what percentage of the listings in an area that are selling are likely using that strategy too. Going to market reports. the next section here. This, again, I like this one for newsletters. I actually use the stats from this specific page to write a newsletter. And I'm going to show you just one way that you can do this in a very easy way. AI is amazing these days. If I just take a quick screenshot of this graphic here, and I go into something like Google Gemini, you can use whatever you want, Google Gemini, ChatGPT. If I just paste this in here and say, create a real estate newsletter for, I'll just make it up, even though it's not for the Kingston area. I'll say for the Kingston area, based on the stats in this screenshot, make it approximately 500 words. And it can take the stats from that and it can create a newsletter. These market stats, it gives all the key things that you'd see in those infographics and newsletters, that kind of thing. And any of the AI programs are really good at spitting something out like this. The one thing I definitely caution you about is if you're doing this, make sure that you verify all the stats. You don't just assume that they're right, especially since it's reading an image. It may have some mistakes in some of these, right? So here it goes, it spits out like a newsletter, sample newsletter for me. You can change the style, like whatever you want, the tone that this is in. You can say, okay, add some local news sources in here, things like that if you'd like. But here you just put together a newsletter very quickly for me within seconds based on that graphic that I pulled from the Habistat. So that's one kind of pro tip that I'd say is really useful for something like this, because this does give a very good snapshot of a market report, including the month over month, year over year numbers. And AI can be really good at breaking that down if it's something that you're not comfortable with taking the time to do on your own. Active listing waterfall is the next one. This one's visually appealing, but it's kind of confusing if you look at it, you don't know what you're looking for. So what this active listing waterfall is, you can choose a start month and an end month and the location. It'll show you on the left, the first month, how many listings were active at that time. So this is December 2024 till today. So there were 38,000 listings on December 24th. Then if you follow the waterfall, you can see how you can get to the number of listings today, which is 54,237. So this green bar going up shows you how many new listings were during that period, 82,000. Shows you how many of them were suspended. So it's taking away from that number. It's also subtracting expiries, terminations, transactions to get to the final number. So this is kind of neat because you can see like how many listings are coming off market versus how many are selling as transactions to get to like where the final number of listings is. So it's a bit of like a private investigating, like following the paper trail kind of overview. Analyzing a building. This is actually a very powerful tool. If you haven't seen this before, definitely check it out. I know there's a listing that we've got coming up on 17 Eldon Hall. So I'll use that as an example up here in Kingston. What you can do is you can take any building with multiple units, and it takes a second to look for it, but here it popped it up here, Eldon Hall in Kingston. And you choose the address and it'll show you the history of the sold properties and listed properties in that building over the time period that you've put up along the top here. In this case, it's the last 3 years. So it shows you things like average list price, transaction volume, new listing volume, average days on market. One thing I really wish it showed was the sale, like the square footage price, the average square footage price. It does show the average maintenance fees, which is kind of useful, but obviously there's some information that's missing here that would be nice to have. It does have a bit of a tracker along the bottom, which shows all of the status changes in the building on all the listings that have come up in the system. So if you're going to be listing a property, or if you're just doing some market analysis on a specific individual building, this is a great way to do it. One thing to note, though, is there has to be a specific threshold of volume in order for a building to show up here. So if there's less than 5 transactions in the past 5 years, it won't show up as a building address here. So don't be shocked if you've got a low turnover building, it doesn't show up on this list. So this is a useful, definitely a useful tool. Listing turnover is another graph here that it can show you. I don't find this super useful, but it's another tool we have at our disposal. So this just shows you for any given month, any of the listings that were listed that month, where they're at, like what's happened to them. If you look along the first column here, it shows you how many are still active. So obviously the ones that were listed last month, still a large chunk of those are active. Whereas if you go further back in time, you get smaller and smaller proportions of those are still active. Then you can see how many have been taken off the market, how many were sold in the same day they were posted, how many sold in the first week, second week, third, fourth week, sold after 2 months, and sold in the second month. And all of those will add up to 100%, right? Because they're either still active, they're taken off the market, or they've sold during a specific time period. Just to kind of clarify some of this, like let's say we're looking at March 2024. So this shows you of all the listings that were listed in March 2024, what's happened to them for this region, right? So 0.19% are still active. 50% of them were taken off the market because they didn't sell. And then 0.35% sold same day, et cetera, just sold during the different time periods. It's a bit of an interesting thing. How useful is it in practice? Not really sure, but there it is. So we got historical month-on-month comparison. This is one I actually find pretty useful. A lot of stats that we come across, they'll show you, like here's what happened every month for the past couple years. This one filters out all of those month-to-month data points and just makes it, okay, here's what April was like this year. This is what April was like last year, the year before that. So it takes out the seasonal swings. And the good thing about this is you can see, okay, like how is this April doing compared to last April, comparing to the April beforehand, right? So you can look at long-term trends, like for April, like, the few years back, average days in the market was a lot lower than it was, historically speaking. It looks like historically average days in markets, in the 30 to 40 range. It dipped down. Now it's kind of coming back to normal. But now you can speak to that. Whereas if you looked at average days on market month to month for the past 15 years, you get a lot of up and down swings. It's a little bit harder to filter out that seasonal fluctuation, whereas this helps with that, right? Same with the average price, new listings, months of inventory, like that sort of thing. And finally, the last graph we have here, sales by price distribution. Again, I don't know how useful this graph is. You can get the information from this just from a simple line graph of like the average sale price is, and it's not presented the best, but this shows you every year what the average price was in the different buckets, right? So you can kind of see, okay, from 2010, most houses in this area and for this criterion that we selected, we're in the 200 to 400,000 mark, but that's shifted slowly over time to like the 600, 700,000 mark based on these distributions. So yeah, that's Habistat in a nutshell. There's a lot to it. And like I said, this is the kind of thing where just playing with it can give you a lot more insight than even me telling you about it. But I wanted to make sure everyone had a bit of a groundwork or framework to kind of start with before diving into it, because it can be daunting when you get into it. So at this point, though, I can take any sort of questions if anybody has any questions about the platform. Like I said, it can be a lot. It can be daunting. It's not the most user-friendly. It can be buggy at times, but it is powerful. And I wouldn't just say, it's buggy, I'm going to ignore it. It's something I think you should definitely keep an eye on, especially if you're looking at market stats, because it is the most powerful tool that we have for that. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. The feeds just comes from Trip or from other boards too?
So this is PropTex. So all of the boards that are members of PropTex will be submitting will have their market data on there. As an example, like I'm from Kingston. I know that like Mitch was asking earlier about Hamilton board data. Whatever's reported to PropTex will be on there. The Kingston board data, all of our data now is on PropTex. Hamilton does post a lot of their data to PropTex as well. So you do have access to any board that's part of that system, which is a good chunk of Ontario. I'm not going to say all of Ontario because there's definitely some holdouts, but a good chunk of Ontario. And if you're looking at an area where you're concerned that it may not be showing all of the listings in that area, try and do some due diligence and just try and like compare to other sources of information to see if this is showing everything in its entirety. Last thing you want to do is show like incomplete data if it's only like reporting like 10% of the information for like whatever areas that you're looking at. But for the most part, you'll get most of the data across Ontario here now.
I'm thinking of Waterloo. That's Kitchener, Ontario.
Yeah, so. And again, this is something that you'd have to play around with and check and like verify sources to see. Like there definitely is information in here for like the Waterloo area, for example. But well, I mean, there's 10,000 listings for Waterloo. This is over a 2-year time period, so that would indicate to me, okay, like there's definitely a lot of data here. there's a good chance that's likely complete. But again, if you have any other sources of data to compare to in terms of like sales volume to like make sure they're roughly the same before like relying on the data, I think it's an important step to take in the process.
Thank you.
Hey, Dalal, you got a question?
Okay, yes. Okay, yeah, you record this video, right? This one, later you're going to upload on the YouTube or Excel platform?
I couldn't quite make out what you were saying there, Jalal. I heard you say Excel and YouTube, I think. So we are recording this. So this will be made available on the Excel platform. There's a good chance we'll put it on YouTube as well. But we will have this training up there for future reference.
Yeah, that's
So
why
that's
I want to know. Can you send me the link, please?
so your microphone's coming back a little spotty. So if you have any questions, Jalal,
Driving
you can
on-
just type them.
Yeah,
You can just type
driving
them
on
in chat.
407. Yeah, no, I can, because I'm driving on 407. I don't can this. That's why I can hear all the information, but I cannot move. This is the problem. That's why, but I see information is quite good. That's why if you're able to send me this,
And again, Jalal, like your microphone's kind of coming in and out. It's kind of hard to catch exactly what you're saying. But if you can give me a call later, or you can type your question into chat, and I'm happy to try and clarify it. Hopefully, I answer the question. But again, it's kind of hard to hear you, unfortunately, with your microphone. So yeah, just get in touch with me. I can answer any question if you need it. But Mitch, you got a question there too?
Yeah, so just like
see you later, because right now I'm driving. Okay, I'll text you later.
Yeah, just you can just call me afterwards, Jalal. I'm happy to answer your question. Right, go ahead, Mitch.
so like regarding the like integrity of the data and whatnot, for all of us that are in like IPSO locations where they may or may not send the data in, does Habistat have a way of recognizing that only one transaction happened? Like a lot of listings are listed on both and not necessarily as an interboard listing, but listed separately on multiple boards. Is Habistat counting it as two sales or two listings? Like, or do they have a way by like address or some other way of understanding it's only one?
So again, I don't have a solid answer for you for that. My suggestion would be to compare the data to another source just to see if you can compare, apples to apples to see where it's at, right? I know that all boards publish like their own statistics for like sales volume, like that kind of thing. So even if you just take a look at those, you compare them, and then you can gain confidence in whether or not it's a reliable source of information for that region. Right. That'd be my suggestion, Mitch. I wish I had a more solid answer for you. It's always frustrated me with any source. Like you'll be like, hey, like why are these three different sources slightly different for market stats, right? Like you'll look up the months of inventory or like the average sales price for an area, and depending on where you look, like you get a different number, right? And sometimes they're off by quite a bit, and it can be frustrating if you can't verify that source. You don't want to have egg on your face too if you're sitting with a client and they're like, well, I thought it was this, and you're like, well, this shows this, right? And because the data is only as good as the source as well as the people that are interpreting it. So always trying to do due diligence, compare to other sources to see what you get there. I'm not sure if you still have access to InfoSparks. I know that with HITSO, that was always my go-to. You can maybe compare these numbers to InfoSparks data and see if it's in line. And if it is, it gives you the confidence that the data is sifting out some of that like duplicate entry stuff that you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, Byra, you got a question too?
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for the presentation. My question is on this market insight, the active listening waterfall.
Yeah.
So if you go there, I see, let's say it's my start and end shows December 24, March 25th. So these are the red ones. What does it say?
So yeah, and this graph here, it's not typical, right? Like this isn't something that we're used to seeing. So all it shows is the start month. It shows it on the left here, right? So this is in this case, December 24 or 2024. It shows on the left, and I've got March 2025 on the right.
Right.
So that shows it here. And then it shows you everything in between, and it doesn't give you dates. Like it doesn't show like this is how many are in January, this is how many are in February, this is how many are in March. It just shows what happened between December 24th and March to 25th to all active listings. So all active listings between that time, on December it was 38,000, and today or in March, sorry, it was 54,000. But between then we had 82,000 new listings. That's why it's green, because it's adding to the number of new listings and of active listings. Then all these red ones are taking away from that number. So if you take all the active listings, you add all of the new listings between December and March, there was 82,000 of them, put this number up to 120,000. And then you minus the suspensions, you minus the expirations, you minus the terminations, you minus the solds. It gets you to that number that it follows the paper trail to get you to that final number of how many listings there are as of March 2025. So this is like a paper trail. It's not over time. It's just showing you these different categories: new listings, suspensions, expirations, terminations, transactions, and how the new listings get from A to B.